Now, a lot of you guys out there associate StudioVerse with our Creative Access subscription plans. That's understandable, the two did launch at the same time. But here's the thing, you don't need complete access to every single Waves plugin to enjoy the mixed benefits StudioVerse has to offer you. All you need are the plugins you already have in your library. Whether you're using Horizon, Platinum, Mercury, Diamonds, Golds, or you have a whole bunch of individual plugins, you can set StudioVerse to search with active plugins only by selecting the lock icon. With this selected and using just the plugins in Waves Horizon, our most popular bundle with over 80 plugins for music production, mixing and mastering, I'm going to show you how you can get the most out of the online mix chains in StudioVerse. Okay, let's mix a vocal together and I'll show you a few things about StudioVerse along the way.
Baby, when you find me, won't you bring me back alive? Well, I'll come out nice and slowly, my hands held to the sky.
Let's insert StudioVerse across the vocal track and start by finding some mix inspiration by scanning a small portion of the performance.
Baby, when you find me, won't you bring me back alive?
And in a matter of seconds, we get a list of mix chains ready to try specifically for vocals, and in this case, male vocals. Let's select search chains with active plugins to make sure we're only seeing the chains we have full access to. Now, StudioVerse's AI search is very smart. It links any instrument or track type directly to relevant tracks, saving you from wasting valuable time typing in basic search terms when first loading StudioVerse on a track. Let's take a quick listen to one or two of these chains.
Baby, when you find me, won't you bring me back alive? Well, I'll come out nice and slowly, my hands held to the sky.
Okay, both sound very good, but neither are quite what I'm looking for. That's no problem, we can further refine our search results using keywords and tags to discover alternative sounds. So let's type in retro and vocal effects, and immediately we get a more focused set of chains to play around with. Let's try rich lead vocal.
Baby, when you find me, won't you bring me back alive? Well, I'll come out nice and slowly, my hands held to the sky.
I like that, it's much more like it. Okay, let's take a step back for a moment. If the search chains with active plugins only padlock wasn't selected, maybe you're curious to see what StudioVerse has to fully offer you, then there will be times you come across a chain with missing plugins. Each chain has a plugin icon along with a pop-out list of all the plugins powering that chain. There's some simple color coding to help you quickly establish whether or not you have all the plugins on your system to complete that chain. Red shows the plugins that are not installed, yellow shows plugins that are installed as demos, and no color at all means all the plugins required for that chain are installed and active for use. If you come across missing plugins in a chain that you would like to use, here are some options. You can always visit waves.com to trial and purchase any missing plugins you come across to complete a chain. Or if you feel that a certain plugin doesn't particularly contribute that much to your chain, or you like the way the chain sounds with missing plugins, then you have nothing to worry about. Keep on mixing. A second option to consider, if you want, you can replace the missing plugins with something similar in style. So here, for instance, we're missing F6. We can always replace this with the Renaissance EQ. A third option, well, you don't necessarily need to replace missing plugins with other Waves plugins. You can, of course, use third-party VSTs you already have installed on your system. Studio Rack, the plugin chainer that connects with StudioVerse, is that flexible. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's plenty more to learn about this, so stay tuned. Okay, let's go back to the vocal that we're mixing with the rich lead vocal chain. We've got a really good starting point here. Let's make it work better for this song. Now, all StudioVerse chains have macros. 8 are available. Some chains populate them all. Others may have less. Either way, macros give us easy and instinctive control over how the chain sounds. A macro simply connects to one or more controls in a plugin within a chain, and even links to functions within Studio Rack itself. Again, everything here is super flexible. As you can see here, if I move the treble macro, the high frequency gain control within VEQ also moves. Now let's fine tune the sound of this chain using the macros so that we can get the best possible sound for this vocal.
Baby, when you
Start with EQ.
won't you bring me back alive?
Let's lighten the vocal, pull the bass down, increase the treble.
Well, I'll come out nice and slowly, my hands held to the sky.
Let's push the width for a little bit more atmosphere.
But I won't pretend I'm sorry. for everything
Put some of the bass back.
Breaking other hearts is just the price of having fun.
Sounds nice. Let's increase the reverb, energy, and delay next.
You might not believe me, but I swear you're not the first.
Back the delay off.
Others came before you, and Lord, they added words. All I've ever wanted is the world to know my name. I'll go down in history before I go up in flames.
And it's just that easy to tailor any chain to your song. But if you want to go deeper into a chain, maybe you feel the macros aren't quite sounding as colourful as you need, you can always switch over to the main rack view, which gives you a very familiar way of working with plugins. Click on any plugin and grab any control just as you would in your DAW. If you want to change a chain or make one from scratch, then it's super simple. Plugins stack in series, top to bottom, so one feeds into the next, just like they do in your DAW's mixer. But here's that F word again. You can be as flexible as you want, thanks to how the plugins can work together. At any point, you can splinter a chain off into a parallel mix rack. We have one here in this chain. It looks very complicated, but it's not. And you can use these to blend different effects and processes together. So here we have some delay, doubling, reverb, and some dynamics processing, and the level controls for those at the bottom here. So delay, for instance, the further the fader up was going for this, the more delay you get in the mix. Or you can use multi-band split racks to create surgical frequency-specific processing tools. I know that sounds complicated, but if you understand the concept of multi-band compression, then apply it to this and it will make complete and utter sense. So instead of compression, you can have multi-band effects, say just a reverb in your lower mids, and maybe a chorus stomp box in your upper mids, and whatever combination you want to try. I mean, the possibilities here are really only limited by your imagination. Think outside of the box, and I think you'll be surprised at what you can achieve with this. Now that's Studio Rack in a nutshell. Customizable macros to simplify a chain's use, and the rack for endless plugin chain possibilities. And I really do mean endless. And again, let's go back to the vocal we're mixing. We performed a simple search and ended up with the rich lead vocal chain. We liked the sound of it, and we tailored it a little bit more to our needs using the macros. But I fancy trying a different sound altogether. But I want to keep this to come back to compare. So let's load up another instance of Studio Rack altogether and build a custom chain from scratch. Now I'm going to start by loading in some plugins that are very familiar to me. Let's start with some EQ, and I always have a high pass filter somewhere on a vocal, so let's get that ready. We'll follow that up with some compression. A go-to of mine on every vocal mix is the CLA2A, so it has to be here. Let's get some de-essing in there, because I think this vocal sounds a little bit too harsh in some areas. This will help to attenuate that. Those three plugins there will do the main job of getting tone and control dialed into the vocal. Let's go for effects. So let's get a parallel split rack loaded up. Let's create a few of these. I'm not sure how many I'll need, but I do know the first one I want to be unaffected. Let's enable some of these split racks and load in some effects. Let's go for H delay, and let's load a preset, lo-fi slap with a bit of ping pong. Let's get a bit of doubling going on. This always sounds brilliant out of the box. And let's get some reverb as well. Let's go for a couple of reverbs. Let's go for a spring. They always sound nice and dark and affected. And let's also go for something a bit cleaner. Let's use our verb. And we'll go for a chamber. And that there is really just a good starting point. I could, of course, just stop there and start mixing with all these plugins across all of these racks and down here. But let's use the macros to make my life just that little bit easier. As I said earlier, we've got 8 here we can populate, and we can do that in a few very simple ways. Probably the easiest way is to hit assign, the macro you want, and then the control that you want. So I'm going to go for frequency on band 4. And you can see that now has full control over that. You can also right click on a macro and find the control that you need there. So let's go for peak reduction on the compressor. And we really should be naming these as we go along. I'm going to go for low cut and comp. And the other way that you can connect macros is right clicking on a control, add macro. I know the third one is available. So let's have this de-esser threshold there. Threshold, better rename that as well. De-harsh. And we'll populate the other ones with these effects levels. So right click, as we're here, macro 4, delay, and so on. Now, I don't think I need to look in here again. So what I'm going to do is just go to the macros view and simply play around with them until we get a good vocal sound. Start with low cut and compression.
Baby, when you find me, won't you bring me back alive?
Okay, let's give this some squeeze.
Well, I'll come out nice and slowly, my hands held to the sky.
It's nice, bit of de-essing.
But I won't pretend I'm sorry
Too much.
for everything I've done.
Better.
Breaking other hearts is just the price of having fun.
Okay, let's get the effects dialed in. Delay, doubler, spring, and the chamber verb. Starting with the slap delay.
You might not believe me, but I swear you're not the first.
Just enough to tickle the ears. Doubler.
Others came before you, and Lord, they added words.
Nice bit of spring.
All I've ever wanted is the world to know my name. I'll go down in history before I go up in flames.
Much better.
Yeah, I'm the one. I'm the one who murdered love.
As I said earlier, it's just that easy. Now, one thing I did notice here with these controls is that the D harsh felt like the dial should have gone the other way. Now, we can use the edit window here to change quite a few things with our macros. Here's the third macro slot, threshold, de-esser. We can switch the control range the other way round. So now as we increase the dial, the threshold goes down. It just feels more intuitive. Now, where we stand at the moment, I'm unsure which vocal chain I prefer the most. Was it the chain I found on StudioVerse earlier, or the one I created? What I want to do is save my chain as a StudioVerse chain, and then be able to compare between the two. To save a chain to StudioVerse, first click the drop-down menu in Studio Rack, Save As, give it a name, add an image, add some tags, add a description, and also add an audio ID. Simply hit scan, put your session into playback.
Baby, when you find me, won't you bring me back alive?
And we get an audio ID, which will help the AI search in StudioVerse connect scans for chains with relevant chains. In this case, vocals. And the last thing, here at the bottom, you can choose either to make your chains public or private. Hit save, and then our chain is ready for others to use in StudioVerse. And it can be found under My User Chains here. What I want to do is like this, and find the chain that I had earlier, like that as well. And then I can find both of those under My Like Chains, and I can audition between the two.
Baby, when you find me, won't you bring me back alive? Well, I'll come out nice and slowly, my hands held to the sky. But I won't pretend I'm sorry for everything I've done. Breaking other hearts is just the price of having fun.
Well, they both sound really good. I can't pick. Which one of those chains do you prefer? And there you have it. Getting the most out of StudioVerse using the plugins you already have on your system. If you want to find out how StudioVerse works across different track types, check out the links below, as I've covered mixing with StudioVerse for electric guitars, snares, basses, even a full production. Visit waves.com to download Studio Rack for free today. A galaxy of amazing mix-ready chains is waiting for you and your music projects.